Broncos country, what is going on, man? The NFL Combine is upon us. The players start their workouts tomorrow. Super pumped up for it. And what the Combine always means to me is the opportunity for a lot of these GMs, head coaches, NFL agents to get together and talk about, different deals, trades, what kind of contracts you're going to be expecting for free agents, those things. A lot of that gets done. There's going to be stupid rumors that come out, but it's a really, really exciting time. And after the Combine, we're going to know a lot more about not just the players that are going to get drafted in April's draft, but about what's going to happen, what's the latest rumors, and what are the real type of news coming out when it comes to the NFL draft and the players and NFL free agency as well. So, guys, if you love the NFL draft, if you love NFL content in general, you love Denver sports, it'll help me out a lot if you hit the subscribe button, like the video, check some of the other videos out too, man. I got a lot of really great draft content that I've posted and a lot more to come that I'm super, super excited about. So let's dive right into it. Well, one of those guys, and Sean Payton and George Payton, they talk with the media. It was really insightful. I really always enjoy the Combine pressers because I think it tells a lot without fully telling a lot if you can learn to read through the tea leaves. And I think that's one thing Sean Payton does a really masterful job of, to his credit, is he'll kind of give a lot, but you don't really know if he's being serious. He kind of wants to keep everybody guessing. And a lot of NFL coaches do a really good job of that as well. But some guys that got brought up, obviously, was like Javonte Williams, and they made it seem like, yeah, we want him back. They're going to say that about all players. Yeah, they're talking to Courtland Sutton's agent, discussing a new deal. And then, so I started thinking to myself, all right, well, what would a deal for Courtland Sutton look like, right? They had a little bit of a standoff last year. They ended up putting some incentives in the contract. He hit them, got himself a couple extra $1 million. He was happy. He's good to go. Well, now he's entering a contract here, and the Broncos have to make a really critical decision. Do they, what I believe is going to be, overpay to keep him to stay? Or do they kind of, play the same game that they did last year, create a little bit more friction? Maybe it's a little bit of a distraction that you want to avoid. Or do they just look at options to trade him? And when I was looking at all the different things that make sense, I really do believe that trading Courtland Sutton might be the best decision for the Broncos this offseason. And before you guys roast me in the comments, which is totally fine, I do have a very consistent history of saying that, even before his quote-unquote breakout year this past season, right? And as a team that definitely does lack talent on offense overall, in terms of like guys that can go out there and just make plays, it kind of seems a little counterintuitive to trade your best receiver, right? But I need you guys to hear me out on this. Very similar to the running back situation going into last year. They were so intent on like keeping Javonte, and maybe they can get the most out of him, and then Jaleel, and then maybe we'll see what we could do with Estime. And they were kind of going on so much of this hope strategy that it kind of affected them, because they didn't really address that. They didn't address running back at all in free agency. In fact, they let Samaje Perine ultimately leave. And then they didn't draft a running back until, the 5th round with Audric Estime, somebody that to me didn't really make sense because he profiled to be very similar to what Javonte Williams was. And what ended up happening is it was just an absolute mess. Now, on the receiver side, you had a little bit more clarity because you had a true wide receiver one on your team, go-to guy in Courtland Sutton. And that was mainly due to the fact that there was really nobody else, if you really look at it. But in the grand scheme of things, Courtland Sutton is not a true wide receiver one in the NFL. He's just not. He's never been. And the fact that everyone's glorifying his like breakout year or career year or whatever it is that you want to call it, he was 16th in the NFL in receiving yards. And 1,000 yards for a receiver in this day and age really is not all that special. Just like 1,000 yards for a running back, isn't all that special, which is proof why our running back position is so bad. But I look at it like, okay, I loved the youth movement, the focus and the intent on developing the young players, right? Trusting in your process, trusting in your scouts, trusting in the front office to be able to identify these guys, having a vision for them, and making that come to light. Because for so many years before this past year, for 10 years after Super Bowl 50, we have just constantly been let down by us thinking we could put Band-Aids over, different solutions and get veteran aging guys to inflated contracts and all that kind of stuff. And it's time to move on from that. And when I look at Courtland Sutton, as much as I appreciate him and I love the fact that he's like a great locker room guy, he's a team captain, I don't view his ceiling. I think he's actually hit his ceiling. I don't view him being able to take his game to an additional level. And if he does, I don't see it being very significant, and definitely not for a very long time, given that he's going into his year 30 season. And so what that does is it could kind of hinder the Broncos from being able to just go out there and get players that they love, right? So I'll give you an example. Like, let's say we end up signing Courtland Sutton to an extension. We give him an extra 2 years. And, if it ends up being like a 2-year, $30 million extension on top of the $16 million that he's getting this year, you can deal with that because you're not committing to him for too long of a time. But even by doing that, you're still, maybe like, let's say there's a receiver in the draft that you love. You might skip on taking him because you feel like maybe a guy at a different position can come in and contribute more quickly. And, that ultimately leads to you missing out on somebody that's super talented. And that's the one thing that's always kind of bothered me about that, right? Is I've never been a proponent of let's sign guys and let's extend players on your team that are only gonna descend afterwards. And like I said, given his age, and given the fact that he's somebody that really is reliant, like what makes Courtland Sutton really good and a very effective receiver is the fact that he's got a really high football IQ and he's able to box out a lot of guys, strong, big body player, make these crazy like circus catches. That's what he does. But he's never really been a separator. He's never been somebody that like is very good because he's unbelievably, gifted athletically. So as those traits start to decline, usually with those kinds of receivers, everything starts to taper off a lot more in that sense. So there's that aspect too. And like I said, I think it just muddies the water a little bit with the wide receiver room as a whole. Secondly, if you look at Sean Payton's history has always been somebody that doesn't really overly rely on a lot of different receivers. Like in the best offenses that he's ever had, he's had a true number one, like, a Michael Thomas or a Marcus Colston or, somebody like that. And then the next leading receiver would have like 20 to 30% of the catches that the main guy get. The second receivers are typically that quote unquote joker role that everybody's been talking about, right? With the tight end and the running back position. So that being said, as counterintuitive as that might sound to the point I was trying to make, what I'm saying is that it's almost easier to find a true number one wide receiver in Sean Payton's offense because you only need to have one guy and it's a very specific type of body type. A big body guy that's good at running, the short to intermediate routes, not necessarily a burner. You have a burner that can do, specific for stretching the field deep. And there's guys in this draft that I think are capable of doing that day one. There might even be guys on this roster that can develop and take the next step in their development to be able to do it. And I think it's a really good time to be able to do that. Bo Nix is now entering his second season, so he's going to be a lot better. He's going to take the next step in his development. He's going to be able to get the most out of guys that are going to be on his roster. And a lot of these guys can grow together. And if you think about it, this is a pretty, like, we have like 6 picks in this year's draft. So yeah, we have a first, a second, a third, a fourth, and then 1, 2, 3, 6. We have 7. Yeah, we have 7 picks in this year's draft. Nothing crazy, but it's a good draft to be able to continue to, get some capital in. There's a lot of really good talent in those, day 2, day 3 area. A lot. And if you're going to tell me that you could get Courtland Sutton traded, or you can get a third round pick for Courtland Sutton in this year's NFL draft, you've got to be intrigued by that. His trade value is never going to be as high as it is right now moving forward. It's only going to go down. Even if he repeats and he has an even better season next year, because of his age and all that, his value is just going down. So if his value from a trade standpoint is going down, what makes you think that paying him more money in the coming years makes sense? Those two things should be able to kind of go hand in hand, right? And that's kind of just not the case. So, that's kind of my TED talk a little bit on what it is to be able to what I would like the Broncos to see the Broncos do moving forward in terms of their vision for building out this team. Are you creating a massive hole? I wouldn't say you're creating a massive hole. I think you're maybe creating an additional hole in the offense, but I don't think it's going to be one that's going to be very difficult to fix. And it's going to be nice to be able to give more opportunities to a lot of these young guys. And it could also be the fact that I just watched a lot of tape on Alec Ayomanor from Stanford, fell in love with the dude, projects to be like, he actually, in a lot of ways, reminded me of Courtland Sutton, but he's more athletic. I think he's a little bit more physical even, and he's a very impressive player. I'm gonna have a dedicated film review video on him coming up, but just check how, look into a guy like him in terms of the work ethic, the things that you read and you hear about him, the fact that he absolutely dusted Travis Hunter in one half, the second half of the Stanford game in the 2023 season. They were down 29-0 at half. Sorry, CU Buffs fans, but I remember remember where I was when that game happened. And he blew up in the second half against Travis Hunter and the Buffs. They ended up coming back and winning that game. But he had 13 catches, 294 yards, and 3 touchdowns in one half. And he was guarded by Travis Hunter on 7 of those catches and 2 of those touchdowns. It was absolutely immaculate. And for somebody that has played on a really, just for lack of better words, an extremely shitty offense for a couple of seasons, he's always been the bright spot. He's always coming up in big moments. So I don't want to make this a like a Omen or video because I'll have one dedicated to that. But, that kind of got me thinking too that, you draft this kid, whether it's late in the first or, you move back a little bit, you take him late in the first or sometime in the second round if he falls to you. He is a plug and play guy that can come in my opinion, replace Courtland Sutton right off of the bat. So do I hate Courtland Sutton? No. But do I feel like it's smart for the Broncos to invest their money while they have it into him, into a player that is on a downward trajectory, or at least is certainly not on an upward one? So the answer to that is no. You've got to have, a smart way to be able to spend your money. And you've just got to trust, like if Broncos country really does trust in Sean Payton and George Payton's ability to, identify talent, scout them out, draft them, and then develop them in their system for the vision that they have, then they should have no worries with needing to replace Courtland Sutton. It can be done. I can assure you guys that. So do I think it's going to happen? I think it's a very low chance, but something that you guys should take some time and consider. So anyways, let me know below in the comments. Roast me if you want. Tell me I'm crazy. Agree with me, whatever it is. But I love to interact with y'all. So let me know what you guys think about that below. And regardless, stay tuned for a lot of the draft reviews coming out. But spend time with those you love the most, more importantly. And until next time, Broncos country, peace out.